So I will and take them down when I have said that you can do that. So please, here is the first question. This lady in shall I say leopard, black and white, something like that. Please.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Allerton from the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority in the
sorry.
UK. Okay.
Dr. Atherton, who is one of the speakers tomorrow, yes.
I have a comment on trust as well. I think if you go back to the sort of 70s and 80s, the nuclear industry in particular was very strong at saying, trust me, I'm the expert. And that was the message that was communicated quite a lot. I think we've moved a long way from that, and now what we say is, test my actions, test my behaviour. As Klaus says, see if I do what I said I was going to do, and see if I am trustworthy. And I think that's the difference, that we're now saying, am I trustworthy? And it's up to the individual to make that decision. The power is back with them to test what I do and how I behave, and to decide if they think they can put their trust in what I do.
Thank you very much. I think that actually a bit solves what I asked about when it comes to falsibility, in a sense that it is not a scientific question of falsibility, but a societal function of falsibility. If I do not, if pacta sunt servanda, as you lawyers usually say, if I do not follow what I have said, then I should not be trustworthy, so test me. Thank you. There was a gentleman, yes, please. I will probably say the gentleman in the tie, and everybody will rise, but there is definitely one in the tie, so please go ahead.
Well, I'm Erik van Hove from University of Antwerp in Belgium. I think I come back to the comment made by the president of ANDRA that agencies need modesty. And in the sense, you also have to plan now for your own demise. You have to do some estate planning as an agency, and one of the elements is loss of trust. You should make it in such a way that within society sufficient information, sufficient competence, sufficient control is disseminated through transparency, so that in the case of loss of trust, forces in society are sufficiently present to take over. Because loss of trust, well, a trust system also means a loss of competence on the one doing the trusting. You should also plan for losing control. There will come a point, anyway, that agencies no longer exist, no longer have the capacity to control whatever they decided beforehand, and that, for example, retrieval will happen. There is not a single instance within our historical past where something interesting wasn't retrieved in a very respectable way by archaeologists or whoever. So a retrieval will happen, and also loss of control, loss of monitoring will happen. And in a sense, the plans you make now should have the humility to plan for those contingencies.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that some of the pharaonic graves were that there should be there an eternal rest. So we'll have one more comment from Republican, please.
I am Count Pescatore. A few comments. First, regarding the credibility and trust, I believe here we are missing the regulators, because in the end it is them who also assure some degree of trust, but themselves they have to say, they're not to say, trust me, I'm the expert, because they are in the same boat as the implementer. So this is a big question, which we cannot simply say the regulator will tell us it's safe. No, they cannot tell you that it's safe, because they just know as much, in fact less, than the implementer, I believe. So this is very delicate. And it is important to have in society mechanism that trust, that check the regulators and implementers and others. And this is the strength of what is happening now in society, where we see that civil society is trying to get up to speed. We have to help them. We have to be all of us together in this boat. Regarding irretrievability, irretrievability cannot be the goal. Cannot be the goal, because as Erik just said, things will be retrieved. We have mines with 50% high-grade uranium ore, and we can retrieve them, and they do them. If the economic interest is there, it will be retrieved. Irretrievability cannot be the goal. So we have to use retrievability as a means perhaps to close down options together. Finally, I believe for the long term, your presentation, Per, was great, there is one item which was reflecting from a judicial point of view, is the following. You are building a nuclear facility, and even when you close, this is still a nuclear facility. And I never heard that anybody can remove a license from a functional nuclear facility, which means that basically you have to be aware of this forever, as long as you exist. And if you are aware, you have to be aware of this for as long as you exist, then it means that safeguards will be existing as long as they exist. Only you have to provision for perhaps the day you lose control for many other reasons. But you cannot, in my opinion, I cannot see society removing a license from something which is a functional nuclear facility.
Thank you. Some comments from the panel on these issues, please, Timo. Perhaps, yes?
Yes.
But let's start with Timo, because I think I was the one who... Sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I just, Claudio Pescatore just showed how important the legislation really is. That when saying that the regulators are in the same boat as we do, and how nuclear facility cannot be de-licensed. So, first of all, the legislation is important because the society, through this legislation, says what the requirements are indeed, what has to be shown and what has to be assessed, and how things go. And at least in our case, it has been said that the sealed and finally closed repository is not anymore a nuclear facility. And then the other part is that the regulators, when they actually do their job, they get their requirements from the society, and they just make them more precise and what we have to fulfill. So when earlier there was a question of the regulatory system, how good that system is. So there is a lot of thinking with the politicians to decide upon what shall be the society's requirement be through the legislation to the work of the regulator.
Just that I got it right. Maybe it's just a secondary point from the in the general context. But you said that from your point of view, a closed repository is no more a nuclear facility. Is that?
No, by the definition in the law.
In the Finnish law.
Yeah, in
Yes.
our law,
All right.
of course. But of course, physically it's a repository, but the law legislation is more of defining things.
Yeah, of course. It's as it usually is. Per, please.
First of all, the question of removing a license. My argument is rather based on the idea of transfer of responsibility from the private operator to the state. The state, which only, according to international law, has the final responsibility. My argument is that such regulating already beforehand the modalities, the principle for such a transfer, would enhance legitimacy and trust in the regulatory system, which I think is something which we should, which is really desirable here and necessary. The question about retrievability, I think I tried to be clear that retrievability or not retrievability is not an absolute term, so it's a sliding scale. Of course, absolute irretrievability is impossible. My argument is rather that in order to fulfill responsibilities of control, it is better to limit possibilities of retrievability as far as possible. I would see this as a part of the obligations of physical protection of the operation in order to hinder proliferation in this case. My big point is really that I can see in the debate a tendency to wishful thinking about keeping the bun and eating it at the same time, i.e. have full retrievability and no responsibility for surveillance and to my mind, that does not function. That's an internal contradiction that does not function. And therefore I want to get this question up on the table. About trust, we have been thinking really about trust in one perspective, and that is the public's trust in the industry and also to some part in the regulatory system. I argue that both are very important. There is another aspect of trust, because I think this is a mutual concept. Do you trust does the industry trust the public? Does the industry trust the regulators?
In a democracy, do they have a choice of not trusting?
Formally, no. But in reality, of course, there is a choice. And the trust, I mean, trust must be deserved. I think Klaus' comment there was very important. Trust is something you gain by action.
Every day.
But if people do not even know how electricity is produced and 55% of the public think that astrology is a science, is the public trustworthy?
Good question. And that is the one I'm posing.
Well, let that hang in the air. These are the things that the frivolities that moderators can we just ask the most stupidest questions. Now, please, there is one more from the public. Please.